Hey, it's Greg from Cutting Edge Stencils, and we are live in Ramsey, New Jersey from the Cutting Edge Stencils studios. If you've been watching us on How to Paint and Stencil with me, Greg Swisher, you understand that we are featuring a stencil in every episode. Today's feature stencil is the Medina tile stencil. I happen to love this one, and I'm going to be painting this a little bit later. I'm going to ask you a question during this episode, and the first person to answer correctly in the comments section will win this stencil. For the rest of you that don't win it, that want it, you just enter Medina 40 in the coupon code box at cuttingedgestencils.com, and you'll save 40% for today only. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about preparation. Just like real estate, location, location, location. In painting, it's preparation, preparation, preparation. So you want a good surface for painting or stenciling. If your surface has bumps, it has a lot of texture, it's going to be more difficult to stencil. So what I recommend is using 120 grit sandpaper on either a sanding block, and I'll show you. This is the way I would get the job done, on a sanding pole with a block on it. 120 grit sandpaper, knock down the walls. It's a great grit to get the big stuff off and without being too fine. I do recommend 220 sandpaper, a finer grit sandpaper. The higher the number, the smaller the pieces of sand on your sandpaper. I recommend that for trim. So your baseboards, your doors, your crown moldings, sand those with 220. The walls, 120. Okay, so let's say that we sand our walls. We're going to paint the walls first. We're going to do a stencil project. We sand the walls. We get those knocked down. But let's say that there is a dent in the wall. What are you going to do? Well, you're going to use one of these great products here to fill the dent. Essentially, it's spackle. They make all different types. They make super lightweight spackle. They make the traditional medium weight spackle. I happen to prefer this. And they make really heavy outdoor spackle. These are all great products, but I'm going to fill this hole with this medium weight spackle. So I like to have one spackle knife in one hand, and I like to have another little knife in the other hand. And I like to use one knife to hold my spackle. Okay? So if it's a small hole, you can use a small knife. Correct size tool for the job. Very important. Just like screwdrivers, same thing. You want to use the right size tool. Put a little bit on the edge there. Look at how easy this is. Here's another thing. Always remember where your material is. You know, this way it's not falling on the ground. You're not stepping in it. You step in this, you track it everywhere. Good news is it comes up with a wet sponge. So I'm going to take this spackle. I'm going to fill this hole and just pull it tight. And that's it. And then I'm going to take the remainder here, scrape it back in here, and seal it up. You want to keep this closed so it doesn't dry out, but here's another tip. If your spackle is a little dry, add a little bit of water and stir it up. It's water resoluble. That means it will come back, it'll reconstitute. If it gets a little bit hard and crumbly, you can put a few drops of water in there, stir it up, and it should be good to go. Okay, so we've done our repair here. We let that dry. Probably for, this isn't a really big hole. We'd let this go for maybe an hour or so. Light sand with that 120 sandpaper. And then we check and see if it shrunk. If it did shrink, we're going to take a little bit more, give it another coat, another light sand. Then we would prime it. It's good to prime these repairs because they're very porous. If you paint the wall without priming this, the paint will flash. What that means is that there will be a different sheen. This will be a different look. This will look flatter. This won't reflect the light in the same way that the rest of the wall does. So we want to make sure that the porosity, how porous it is equal to the rest of the wall. So there's many different primers that you can use here. Now, I'll give you a quick overview of the primers. Standard water base primer. I don't even deal with oil base anymore. It's just too toxic. The VOCs, volatile organic compounds, just stuff you don't want to be around. So I tend to use all water-based products. They're very good these days. Kills is one of them, and it works. It's a good primer. You can also, as you can see, this has been tinted. You can have this tinted to approximately the color you're going to be painting in. So if I was painting, say, dark brown or this color, this warm browny beige color, I tint it to this color first. I do my repairs in this, and then when I put my paint on top, it's not like I'm trying to put this color over bright white. That would take 2 coats maybe, or 3 coats. I try to get it close. So you can have your primer tinted. That's a really good tip. Now here's a primer. We don't use it a lot these days, but Bin is alcohol based. It dries super quick. It sticks to everything. I really like it. It is toxic. I do try to stay away from it these days, but it's really great for certain applications. It's the best stain blocker out there. If you have a piece of wood that has the knot has bled through and there is this dark color coming out of the molding, this will block it. If you have a water stain that came through your ceiling, this will block it out. Most regular paints on top of that would not do that, and the stain would bleed through. This is Sticks Primer. This is one of our favorites because it sticks. We use this for our tile floors. We use it for applications where there's a shiny surface or a shiny paint and we really need something to stick well to it. Just so you know, the shinier the surface, the more difficult it is to get adhesion. If you just painted your latex or acrylic wall paint over top of a shiny baseboard, you might not get very good adhesion. You might be able to scrape that off with your fingernail. So we always recommend to lightly sand the surface first, which will break the sheen and give the paint something to grab onto. In the more difficult cases like tile, I would still give it a light sanding to try to break the sheen and then use the sticks, and that's really going to give us good bonding, and that's what we want. Then we can put our regular paints on top of that. So we would then prime this when the repair is done. This is just a quick overview of primers here. I'm going to move those aside. How about caulking? Latex caulk. If it says bathtub or window and exterior window and door caulk, you probably don't want to use that inside because that is really a solvent base. You cannot take a wet rag and wipe that off. It's very hard to manipulate, although it works very good for those cases where it needs to be waterproof. This is just regular vinyl caulk. It's PhenoSeal. It's a good one. DAP makes them. They're great. So what you do is you take your knife, you cut the tip. Don't cut a huge hole. Can you see what I'm doing here? I'm going to go in maybe 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to cut it at an angle. Okay? I cut that at an angle. I've got that nice little hole there. Maybe I can open it up, but always start small and work your way up. Then I'll just show you here. So the way this works is you slide this in, you push that forward, and then you can squeeze this, and the caulk should come out of the tip. And there it is. Always have, look at that, your wet rag. Ooh, I can show you how the wet rag works. The wet rag is great. Have a wet rag if you want to. Oh, by the way, see how it's still coming out? Push the button. That releases the pressure and will stop it from coming out. Now, it stopped. When I want to have it come out, I just pull the trigger. So, you see this gap here? I'm just going to lay this right in the gap, and I'm just going to slightly pull the trigger, and when I get to the end, I hit the back button so it unlocks it. Sometimes you got to hit that a couple times, and that's that. I'm going to put the caulk aside, and let me just clean this up. Then you take your wet rag, and you know, you don't even want to mess with it that much. If you did a good initial caulk job, you don't want to mess with it too much, but you can take that and just wipe that with the finger. Any excess you can wipe out with your wet rag. And now we've caulked that crack. We let that dry. That will be ready for paint. So that's just a quick overview on caulking. Now, I am going to open a can, and I'm going to hit this Medina here. And I'm going to ask you guys to be thinking about what grit sandpaper did I recommend you use on the walls. And the first person to answer that question will get a free Medina tile stencil. Everyone else, if you would like to buy the stencil for today only on cuttingedgestencils.com, you can save 40% by putting in Medina 40 in the coupon box. Everyone can save 40%, but one person will be the lucky winner. Now you see what I did here? I poured my paint. I took a paper towel. You can take a paper towel. You can have a brush if you'd like. I take, if I don't want to get a brush dirty, I take a paper towel, I fold it up, I put it in the crease of the lid, and I clean that crease. And I clean the can. And this way, the lid's going to go on nicely. I'm not going to get all this dried paint in the can, on the edge of the can. And I'm going to show you another trick. When you put the lid on, take a paper towel or a rag, place it over the top. This way, whatever paint is in that little trough there won't go spattering everywhere. Now my paint can is clean, it's sealed nicely, and it's ready to go. Now I'm going to take my dense foam roller. We talk about this on every episode, really. This is how you stencil. And you're going to evenly and deliberately load your dense foam roller. And then you're going to take 2 paper towels. You're going to fold those, and you are going to, always close your knife, you are going to offload your roller on to the paper towels. This will give you the proper load on the roller. See that there? We're going up here now. Right here to our Medina. I'm going to, oh, by the way, 8 pieces of tape. Cutting Edge Stencils level tells me I'm perfectly level. This is a great tool. Light to medium pressure. Start to build up your coverage. Don't be looking for 100% coverage in your first time around the stencil. If you do, you're going to get bleed. You're going to be pushing the paint underneath the edge of the stencil and get a less than perfect edge. We're not looking for that. Last load here, last offload, back up. And don't forget, cuttingedgestencils.com, Medina 40, save 40% on this Medina tile wall stencil today. Today only, by the way. And each episode will feature another stencil. And I'm not going to go for full coverage here. I want it slightly broken, but you'll get the idea. And remember, don't try to get coverage right away. Build it up slowly and gradually increase the pressure of your roller or brush if you're using a brush. Okay, so I'm pretty much there. Now the question was, What grit sandpaper do I recommend to sand the walls? And the answer is 120.